Started at 7 o'clock, if we could, please. So tonight we're calling the Southfield Redevelopment Authority Board of Directors to order Thursday, October 27th at 7 p.m. at the Weymouth High School here. On the agenda tonight is the redevelopment update from BPD Union Point LLC. So I'm going to introduce them in a minute. I just have a few words to get started. I want to first, again, I'm Tom Henderson. I'm the chairman of the Southfield Redevelopment Authority. I want to thank the residents, the HOA leadership, and the members of the community for joining this community update. Tonight's update will be a framework of what the Brookfield Properties and New England Development team have been doing since they were chosen as the master developer by the SRA. As some of you may know, the SRA conducted a comprehensive selection process to choose what we feel is the best partnership given the broad experience and success of Brookfield Properties and New England Development. We are very excited to collaborate with them to make this development a success in every way. So you may ask why New England Development and Brookfield Properties. It's worth noting that Brookfield Properties is involved in residential and commercial projects throughout the United States, working to bring high-quality, sustainable real estate to life. They have an extraordinary track record. Along with New England Development, brings extensive local and national expertise with more than 40 years of experience to the region. New England Development exemplifies a creative, entrepreneurial approach to real estate development and management, delivering and sustaining successful projects across a wide range of property types. As a trusted partner, New England Development has a wide-ranging knowledge of the region and the complexities of a project like this. You will hear more from them shortly. So just a little bit about the SRA, some of you I'm sure are very familiar with, is a local government agency of the former South Weymouth Naval Air Station. The 1,400-acre community of Union Point, formerly Southfield, is located within 3 host communities of Abington, Rockland, and Weymouth. Established in 1998 by the Massachusetts Legislature and reconstituted as the Southfield Redevelopment Authority, the agency acts as the municipal control over land use and development decisions affecting each of the 3 towns. With us tonight, I just want to go through the board members. We have the vice chairman is David Rubin, a resident of the Southfield community, and Monica Horan. The Weymouth reps, Pat O'Leary. Chris Pimariano could not be with us tonight. From Abington, newly appointed, Roger Woods. From Rockland, myself and Kelly O'Brien McKinnon. We have a labor representative, which is Robert Rizzi. He's not here tonight. We have a South Shore Chamber of Commerce rep, Joseph Grata, who could not be with us tonight. So the working relationship between SRA and NED, or New England Development, and Brookfield Properties since the selection. Before I introduce the development team, it is important to emphasize the working relationship that has developed since the selection process. With the local expertise of New England Development and the impressive resources of Brookfield Properties, the development team has been working diligently on numerous fronts and a strong working relationship with the SRA. If I could add personally, in going through what we've gone through over the past 3 years, we had to select a new master developer. We went through a pandemic, and we had to get this project back on track. I have to say, working with this team at New England Development, and particularly John Tuig and Tony Green, what I like about working with them is the honesty and the trust that has been built so far on this project. And that's what's so important. Being able to deal with issues, resolve them as professionals, to do what's best for not only the residents that live in the community, but the entire region, looking at the approach from many different angles. And I thank them and their team for the work they've done so far, and I look forward to what the future brings. So I want to introduce John Tuig of New England Development. And one thing, John, before I do, I'm sorry, I want to recognize John Abbott is in the room, a Weymouth City Councilor. Thank you for being here. Bob Luongo, the Weymouth Town Planner, he's representing Mayor Headland, so thank Bob for being here. And Gary McDougall, Weymouth Town Council, representing Mayor Headland. Thank you so much for being here. And again, John, thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Good evening, everybody. I'm going to try to use this wireless mic. They said the batteries are almost dead, so if you stop hearing me, that's why. My name is John Tuig, as Tom said, from New England Development. We put together a presentation for you tonight. It's not great in the sense of some of the word graphics, but we'll sort of talk about it. Don't feel you have to read it. You don't really have to. To my left, we have Sid Kerrigan, who is the president of Brookfield Properties for this region, Tony Green, who's our partner in Pine Hills, and Ricardo Dumont, who is with Dumont Jenks, who's our master planner. You'll probably hear from the four of us. Also, Paul Sincotta is to my right from New England Development. We brought our entire project team, and because not everybody is comfortable asking questions, getting up and doing things. So there was some question about maybe after the meeting, we're going to stay around for a few minutes. If people don't feel like they want to ask questions, we are going to have a question and answer at the end. And we're going to talk to you about the website if you want to ask questions about that and how you can do that. If you don't want to come up after the meeting, but we will be here for 15, 20 minutes afterwards, just so people can, we have people like Bob Daler, you see some of the names up there, Bob Daler from Tetra Tech, our engineer is here, Tim Sullivan, who leads our permitting group, just so you can ask any questions that you may have as we move forward. A lot of us have been together for a long time. This is the group that we sort of travel with, and I'm going to show you some of the projects that we've worked on, so you can get a sense of the kind of work that we have done over the years and the kind of work that we continue to do and what we're going to try to do here at the base. A few things about New England Development. You do not have to read any of these words. New England Development, what is it? New England Development was formed about 40 years ago by our current chairman, Steve Karp. We were originally a regional shopping mall developer. That's what we did. We built probably about 25 regional shopping centers. When you go in, if you're in New England and you go into a Simon Mall, that was a mall we probably built and we developed and owned, but we sold about 20 years ago the bulk of our mall portfolio because the regional mall business was changing and we saw it was changing back then. Yeah, I know, I saw someone already put their thumbs down. Yeah, not for the better, by the way. And we'll talk a little bit about one of our projects that we still own that's a regional mall, what we're doing with it. But it was a changing business. So about 20 years ago, we went really into what I'd call the mixed use business, which was developing residential, developing planned communities like Pine Hills was one of the communities that we did. We went, and we're not going to show you tonight, but we went over to Nantucket. We own most of the boat slips in Nantucket. We own 50% of all the commercial property. We own most of the hotels. That's something that we sort of went into as a deal. We went into Newburyport and did a similar thing. We started building outlet centers all over the country. We built them in Little Rock, Arkansas, and Virginia, and Florida. And when you go to West Palm Beach, all the stores that you see down there, that's a lot of what we've done. So we really started to change as a company and started to think about what is the future. And one thing, in one of the projects I'm going to show you, and I hate these words, but they say them, they sort of live, work, play. I mean, the sense where people are living there, there's sort of a town center that's part of that has retail, that people are working there, there might be office and other things that really just make it a different kind of place. Because one of the reasons the regional shopping mall, in the old days, I was young, you went to the regional shopping mall, you spent 4 hours at the mall, and your kids would be there. It isn't like that anymore. People don't have the time, certainly pre-COVID, and even as we start to move through, people want in, out, fast, multiple convenience. They don't want to have to do 5 trips. They want to be able to go to one place and do everything that they want to do. It's a different world, and that's why we sort of morphed into doing other things. Office, pharmaceutical space. I'm going to show you one of our projects that we're doing right now in Cambridge. We went and today we have 2 lab buildings currently under construction, just to give you a sense of the different types of things that we went into and have been in really over the past 20 years. The only thing that you get a sense here, and I'm going to talk about a series of projects. University Station, Paul, if you'd go to that. If you know 128 and Amtrak, Westwood. But before I talk about the project, I'm going to tell you why I picked that one as the first one. A couple of things. 10 years ago, it was a project that had failed. It had gone into bankruptcy. It owed $400 million to the bank and to the equity holders. All of its permits were screwed up, and that's a technical term, but they didn't work. They had made all kinds of commitments to the community that they couldn't live up to. And if you think that might have some relevance to sort of what we're going to talk about tonight, we had a lot of really ticked off people who lived in Westwood and Dedham and Canton who had great expectations about what that site was going to be. And when we got it, we sort of walked into all that, where the regulators said, this doesn't work. where the people who are going to come there from a retail standpoint said, we sort of don't trust what's there. The money had been defaulted upon, so people had lost a lot of money. So I give this as an example of a project that we then took over. It was about 10 years ago, 120 acres. It's about 25 acres of open space. What is it today? We got it approved for 2 million square feet of space. It's got 650 homes in it. It's got almost 1 million square feet of retail. It happens to be where Citizens Bank has their regional headquarters. It is where Brigham and Women, we built, actually Paul and I worked on that project, built their first building at 40,000 square feet. They're adding 50,000 square feet more. We're working with people like Dana-Farber who want to expand in that location for medical uses. We have senior housing there. We have apartments. We have condominiums. It's a very, office buildings for different things. It's a very different project, but it gives you an example of the things that we've been working on over the past years. And it is very instructive as you think about some of the problems that we're going to show about the base that we are living with. That's something that we did. We've built about 1.6 million square feet on that. We got a couple more buildings to do, and then we'll be finished with that. But that's one of the reasons I wanted to show that to you. The next one I wanted to show you is Cambridge Side. It's one of the malls we kept. I don't know if you know Cambridge Side. It's next to the canal. It's in East Cambridge. It's when we built it, and I worked on it starting in 1988. I had been a lawyer about 10 minutes. I was very, very young, and I started working on that with Steve Carp. And at the time, it was an award-winning mall. It was 3 levels down in the ground. It was 3 levels up. It was built on a canal. It was anchored by Lechmere, a Filene's, and I'm really dating myself, Lechmere, and a Filene's, and those were the two. And Sears was the other anchor. Okay. If anybody remembers Lechmere, 70% of all cameras purchased in New England were bought at Lechmere. I got a few nodding heads, so at least I know what it is. So that was our anchor, and that's what we built. And it was a very, very successful mall for a lot of years. We've owned that since 1987. That's one of the reasons I mentioned it. We are a company that, and Steve's commitment is to own, develop, and manage for long periods of time. And that's something that we've always done, and that's why part of Cambridge Side. What is Cambridge Side today? Well, the Sears building, if you drive by Cambridge Side today, now has 2 stories on it that it didn't used to have. Because what happened to Sears? Went the way of all flesh, it's gone. They called us actually on December 11th and said, well, we're going to close. And they said, you must be going to go through Christmas, right? No, we're closing today. And they shuttered the doors, and there was a Sears store that had been open for over 30 years, and it closed. So we were faced with, okay, we lost the Sears. Macy's has closed stores all over the country. There's a Macy's there. There was actually 2 Macy's there, because they took over the Filene's lease, and then they had a Macy's home store. The Macy's today, if you drive by there on Land Boulevard, you're going to see a building that's 11 stories tall, that's 380,000 square feet. Most of the windows are in now, and it's a new lab building on the corner that is going to deal with what's at Kendall Square. The Sears building is a 5-story lab building, fully leased. It'll be opening next year. And I use that as an example of the kind of things that we do about reimagining really what something could be. And we've owned that mall, and we will continue to own that mall. There's also an upper garage. People don't park. They don't go to the malls like they used to. We're actually going to take the upper garage down and build both a residential building, where the Lechmere was, when it became a Best Buy. It's going to be 175 units of residential homes, and then it's going to be a lab building next door. So that's the type of thing that we've done. Go to the next one if you could, Paul, just to kind of give you Alston Yards. Alston Yards is a project that is under construction today. I don't know if anybody knows where New Balance is on the Mass Pike. If you drive by the Mass Pike, you see the New Balance headquarters. You see, well, that's really transformed. I mean, when I was young and Ryerson Steel was there and all kinds of other things, not the greatest place. I mean, that area was called the Stockyards for a reason. I mean, that's what that was. Today, if you drive by there, you're going to see our first building going up. It's a brand new Stop and Shop. Actually, we worked on that Stop and Shop in 1997. It was really cool at the time to build on it 10 acres, this suburban Stop and Shop in Alston. Well, right now, what's there? Commuter rail is there, totally different than what it was. You're going to see a new building going up. We're up to our first level right now, which is going to be 165 new homes and a new Stop and Shop. And next year, we're starting a new building, which is a 400,000 square foot lab building right on the Mass Pike. So if you know anybody who has a pharmaceutical company who wants a really nice sign on the Mass Pike, that's what we want. Again, I give that as an example, the type of things that we're working on in the redevelopment world. The last one I'll touch on is this Pine Hills. And a lot of people, I think, in the room know Pine Hills. Tony Green, our partner, is here. It was one of our first planned communities. It has been a very successful community. You get a sense of the size, actually more acres than we have here at the base, but a lot of residences, other square feet, you know, the green that is there, development. Again, those are the types of projects that we have moved forward on, and just gives you a sense of sort of what New England Development does and who we are. And we're very excited, and you're going to hear a little bit more about, you know, why have we, you know, one of the questions, I shouldn't jump ahead, is, you know, where have you guys been and what have you been doing for a while? We're going to talk about that tonight, but we really decided with our partner Brookfield, who we're very excited to have here with us tonight, committed and stayed committed through COVID to this site because we're very excited about what this can be. So I'm going to introduce Sid Kerrigan, who, as I said, is the regional president for Brookfield. Tell you a little bit about Brookfield. This isn't going to be a commercial about New England Development and Brookfield too long. We're going to get right into the base, but I thought it was important that you at least sort of know the folks who are sitting up front here and what they were trying to convey and what they've done. So, Sid?
Thank you very much, John. Yeah, I'll speak for 2 minutes because you took my other 5 or 10 minutes, but thank you very much for that. I have to say, I joined this opportunity late last year, and little by little, I've gotten to meet the team and know the team, but I learned way more about John Toohey, NED, in the last 10 minutes than I learned in the last 12 months. So, wow, very successful, great track record. So, first things first, I do want to acknowledge the team, John Toohey, Tony Green, Paul Sincata, the NED team, which is awesome, a list of consultants as well. So this really is a first-class team that we're part of here, which, by the way, because this asset, this opportunity is, you know, going to be very challenging. It needs the best that there is, and so far I think that's certainly in place. What I also wanted to talk about quickly here too is I understand, you know, there might be a little bit of angst or wonderment, you know, what's going on, what's taking so long, are you guys that committed? I have to say without a doubt the answer is yes. I also want to make it very clear that when I joined this opportunity late last year, it took a very long time to understand it. I'm sure the consultants and team partners would say, geez, Sid, you know, haven't you got it yet? You keep asking all these questions, but holy cow, it is extremely complex opportunity. And so I have to say, in the last 12 months, even though maybe it didn't look like we were doing much, absolutely we have. There's been a ton of work behind the scenes to get this opportunity ready to put in front of you. And I think that the stakeholders, you know, of all the different stakeholders we have, the most important one to impress upon is you. And so I think now, tonight, we're now able to get that ball rolling. So again, I'm the regional president with Brookfield. Brookfield Properties is the real estate development arm of Brookfield Asset Management. Brookfield Asset Management is one of the largest managers of assets in the world. Brookfield Properties alone, our smaller division, oversees $200 billion in real estate, and real estate across all gamuts. We're talking high-class office, retail, commercial, residential across the board for rent, for sale. So real estate-wise, we would certainly be a market leader across many marketplaces. Right here in Massachusetts, admittedly, not a large footprint of assets. However, that's part of the excitement why we're here. This marketplace, the Boston marketplace, very high demand, very low supply. So over the longer term, this is exactly the kind of marketplace we want to be in. So again, any questions about commitment, staying power, longer term, without a doubt, that's key for us. We love the opportunity to have something with scale, large enough, challenging enough, creates the opportunity for everybody. So again, we're very excited to be here for that. And again, yes, certainly not afraid of a challenging redevelopment. Brookfield Properties, we have about 1,200 employees across the country. And as you know, the last couple of years virtually, it's amazing now how fast we can talk to people. And so, yeah, we've certainly mastered that. On any given point in time, we have access to the best development talent around for all aspects of of the system. So again, we're truly honored to be part of this, to be part of this team, part of this opportunity here in Boston, Weymouth. And so we are very excited to work with the communities of Weymouth, Rockland, and Abington to create something that we absolutely are convinced, fast forward 5 or 10 years, we're going to be so darn proud to walk through, cycle through, walk our dogs through. So again, thank you very much for coming today. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. And again, we're very excited for this. Thank you very much. Back to John Tewig. Thank you.
Thank you, Sid. Sid is being pretty modest about Brookfield Properties. They don't have, and here are a couple of projects that have done, a couple of Massachusetts projects and a couple in South Carolina and California. Part of this is they are a company that understands long-term, large-scale development, and that is with tremendous resources and staying power. We've done that throughout New England, really, and the East Coast, which has been our home. We go as far out as sort of Iowa. Did you ever know there was a Altoona, Iowa? I never did. I thought it was always Altoona, Pennsylvania, until Steve Karp said to me one day, would you like to go to Altoona? I said, sure, in Pennsylvania. He said, no, Iowa. So we have a shopping mall there, but as an aside, it's just, that's sort of our scope, but we've really been focused more in New England. And, the opportunity, we got a sense in talking to Sid and the folks at Brookfield, they're not heavily into this region. I mean, Brookfield is an extremely large company. So they wanted to come into this region, and we thought they'd be a wonderful partner for us because we think alike. It's been a very good partnership. It's been a very warm one. Sometimes when you partner with folks, it's not, you kind of wonder, you get a different way you look at life. We look at kind of long term. We're all from here. We all grew up here. So how other people look at it, but they look at it the same way we do. And that's a wonderful way to be. And that's why we think this was going to be a very, and has been, as Sid said, we've been working together for a while now. So I'd like to go to the agenda. And I hate the fact that this sounds like a lecture because I'm sort of here at a podium, but I'm told I can only move so many feet because then we'll lose the camera. So we really struggled with what to tell you tonight and how to do it. So we're going back and forth and say, okay, what are we going to tell folks? Because it's been a while. Well, this is what we came up with. One, what have we learned? I'm going to tell you a little bit about, okay, we got into this, we got appointed. What did we learn in that period of time? Secondly, what have we been doing? And that's a very appropriate question. I mean, okay, you've had some time now. What have you been doing? What are you going to do with this land? I mean, if you studied the land, do you understand what you want to do with it? We're going to talk about that. Okay, now that you've studied the land, how are you going to do it? What's the process going to be? We're going to talk about that. Some of this stuff is not exciting, and I have to admit that in the outset. But I thought it would be important for you to understand sort of where we've been and where we're going and what we're trying to do and what the process is going to be. A little bit about what we've heard. Now, as I said, we're going to have some questions and answers. Happy to have any questions that you have. We're going to stay here afterwards. But we thought there's some things that we keep hearing, so we're going to give you a little bit of a touch point on those tonight. And then, as I said, we'll open it up for questions and answers. I think everybody in the room knows where this place is. And this is for a little bit sometimes for our friends on television. Just to give you a sense, I don't know, Paul, if we can drop any of the lights here or not, because we're going to get into some of these screens. But obviously 18, Memorial, the sports complex, where some of your homes are, the Delahunt Parkway coming through, obviously the commuter rail. And that's, when we saw this, and we've known this. My history with the base goes way back. I can remember when the Mills Corp, if anybody has been around for a while, which was a very large out-of-state regional shopping center developer, called us up and said, "We'd like to put a 1 million square foot shopping mall there." I won't tell you how many years ago that was. It was a long time ago. So we have a long history with the base, and I think we all know there's been a history of developers on the base, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. So I think everybody knows, obviously, where we are and what we're doing. So what have we learned? It's complicated, and people got mad at me because what I was really going to say, and what I said to people, there's a lot of challenges here, and I said it's a mess. I mean, that was my first comment, and they said, we can't say that. That'd be totally inappropriate, and people get offended by it. But it is. So I threw this up here because one of the people in our office, great project manager, you'll meet her as we go through, works with Paul and I, Risa Myers. She put this slide together, and she said, well, we got to kind of figure out how all the moving parts here. And okay, all right, so ownership, that's sort of at the top piece for those of you that can see it. All right, ownership. Well, we've got people who live there, a lot of people who are with us tonight. You have the SRA, because that's the Redevelopment Authority. You got the Navy, they still own stuff. You have Washington Capital, who foreclosed on L-Star. They own some stuff too. Oh yeah, then L-Star owns some stuff. And then there's all these other federal agencies who own some stuff. Not the easiest thing that you look at. I'm going to show you a map in a few minutes to try to figure out the owner. So, okay, we got some ownership challenges, because when this got foreclosed on, the offer to us as the master developer was really the Washington Capital land. And I'm going to show you in a minute why that really doesn't quite work. But we have an answer to that going forward. So we spent a lot of time ownership. I think probably, stakeholders are here, and I mentioned some of them. It's all of you, it's the SRA, it's the Homeowners Association, it's Weymouth, it's Abington, it's Rockland, it's everybody who lives here. Everybody sort of has a stake in our success, our collective success as we move forward. So we had those challenges. Infrastructure. Well, not that anybody's been talking about water at all in Weymouth, but water, sewer, transportation issues. One thing we learned early on, hey, maybe there's not enough water here. Maybe sewer doesn't quite work. There's a lot of transportation things that have to be done. And I'm going to talk about infrastructure as part of this presentation, but not an insignificant thing that we've spent a lot of time on and trying to come up with solutions for, and how we move it forward. Because here's the biggest thing and the biggest differentiator between the people who have come and probably stood in front of you before. Everybody's always looked at this site and in this development, in this place, incrementally. Well, if I can get a little bit more water and sewer, if I can do this roadway work, I can build some more homes, I can sell another apartment development. One of the reasons that we are very glad to partner with Brookfield and be part of their team, and them being part of our team, we don't look at it that way. You always look at it in a holistic way about the project. We are not going to do the project unless we know we can solve the water, sewer, and the transportation part for the entire build-out of the entire base. Because to come in front of you and to say, well, and by the way, there were some people even who wanted to become the master developer. The quick fix, I can do a little bit of the project, I can Band-Aid stuff together. It's not the way we look at it. The reason I showed you some of the pictures of what we do, we stay with projects 20, 30, we actually have the Bunker Hill Mall, which we built in 1976. I wasn't even born then. But it was, just to give you a sense, a long time. And, things that we've had 30, 40, 50 years, even older than the company that Steve started with his dad, that we've had and continue to work on. So it just gives you a little bit of a sense of that. Other things, before we go to that, Paul, if you wouldn't mind. Permitting just for a minute. You've got every initial in every state agency possible for this project. Natural Heritage, MassDOT, DEP, and then you get all the state and federal ones, MEPA. And we've met with some of those agencies. And I can tell you, virtually every permit doesn't work. And I shouldn't say this, and again, this was the other thing that they told me not to say. Do you know what the access permit on Route 18 says for this project? That you're allowed to put 500 cars a day on Route 18. I have a feeling you have more than 500 cars on Route 18 every day. But that's the level of the lack of follow-through and finishing of the filings and the working with the state agencies to move this forward. So, one of the other challenges, certainly the permitting. A little bit of environmental. We spent a lot of time working with the Navy about, how can we keep any money or any activities that the Navy's going to do on the base to be sure that if there are environmental issues as they turn properties over to us, they can be properly treated from an environmental perspective. So this just gives you a sense. There's much more, by the way, but just gives you a sense of, if you want to see what we've learned that we got some issues, and these are the things that we decided to spend our time on. So there's 4 things I'm going to focus on as part of the agenda. What have we been doing since site selection? Okay. And I hope you, at the end of this, understand that we have actually been doing kind of a lot, and it's things that are going to allow us to be able to move forward. So land ownership. I showed you sort of the different land ownership pieces, but I'm going to kind of go into a level of detail, probably more than you want to hear, but just so you sort of see some of the challenges we've had. We're going to talk about infrastructure, water and sewer. That's what we do. We meet twice a week to talk water and sewer. We're very exciting people. Paul's a professional engineer. Bob Daler with his whole team. We have a whole team that spends nothing but every week trying to figure out water and sewer issues. Regulatory documents, what are those? Those are things with our friends who are the SRA who are kind enough to host us tonight to talk about zoning. and talk about reuse documents and subdivision control laws, all those things. Again, riveting, exciting if you've been 30 years as a land use lawyer, not so exciting otherwise, but important to know about. And then finally, understanding the land, which Tony and Ricardo are going to talk about because it's very important to think about what the vision for this land. So that's really where we've been spending our time. So let's talk a little bit about land ownership. Okay, land ownership. Probably the first part is land agreements. So when we got appointed, it was great, but we didn't have any rights to anything. What you see there in yellow was what Washington Capital foreclosed on. Washington Capital is really the Carpenters Union. There are two Carpenter Union entities that are behind. Washington Capital is an agent for the Carpenters Union. That's who really had lent the money on this site. They being L-Star, defaulted on $60 million worth of debt. So when that happened, they foreclosed on what's the yellow. Okay. Then you sort of have stuff in purple. Originally, this was all Navy, but what you see there in purple, that's sort of what you have as the Navy pieces. And again, and some of them, you know, are right in the middle, so kind of matter to what we can do. Then we had, and we're going to talk a little bit about this, the famous 50-acre Coast Guard piece. I don't know if any of you sort of know about that, but I'm going to tell you some of the stories that are associated with that. Then we had the SRA, which are all sort of in the green. And then we had the defaulting L-Star all in the pink. And then some of you folks who own, sports complex over here, but own different residences like. That's what we got on day 2 after we got appointed. So we sort of all took a look at that and say, okay, what do we do now? Because we don't have any agreements to get any of this. And how do you develop the base on a cohesive basis? How do you deal with all the state agencies when you don't actually own or control the land? So, for example, we went to MEPA and we talked to them about some of the open space, and we said we have some great thoughts about open space. Well, they said, well, L-Star still owns the open space. We didn't own it. Okay. Washington Capital, okay, they didn't have all the roadways and they didn't have a bunch of other things. Not so good. But we went to Washington Capital, took us and the Carpenters Union. We had to make an arrangement with the Carpenters Union and with Washington Capital to secure what you see there in yellow, about 339 acres. That was the first thing we did. And again, they weren't real happy. They had just lost $60 million in a default and a foreclosure. So they weren't real excited about what had just happened. And we were saying, well, we have to fix up all the permits and we have to do all this stuff. And I talked about some of the same things we're talking about tonight. And they said, yeah, well, we lost $60 million, so what are you going to do? So we had that, but we do have that. And we put that in place so we could acquire the piece in the yellow. SRA, your SRA board has been great. It has been efficient, it has been thoughtful, but we were able to negotiate an agreement with them so that we could move forward, that as the land gets turned over by the Navy, we can enter into agreements to be able to acquire that land so we can move forward with the SRA land. Okay, that's good. So we were able to deal with that. U.S. Navy. We have spent over a year negotiating with the United States Navy. Okay, federal government, but in a positive way. In a way to be able to talk to them about, their payments due the U.S. Navy for this land, those monies ought to stay here, and they ought to stay with the base and the people who live here and the land that's here, rather than going back into the general fund to Washington. And they've actually agreed to that. They've been very supportive, helpful, focused on the environmental issues. So those were 3 parties that we could go to and have a discussion. Okay. Then we have the Coast Guard. I think some of you may know the Coast Guard land went to auction. The SRA tried to buy it originally. Matter of fact, I think the federal government was obligated to convey it to an agency, but they decided to put it out to auction, and they did. There were 12 active bidders. We worked very closely with the SRA. The SRA was the successful bidder. We supported them in that bid, and that is actually now owned by the SRA, which doesn't sound like much, but is a really big thing. And the fact that that land didn't go, because people who were looking at that, and I'll tell you, very sophisticated people bidding millions of dollars. It sold for over $6 million. Some I talked to, and they said, well, we're just going to put a 40B there, and that's what we're going to do, and so we're going to buy it. And we said to them, well, you know that on the base you can't do a 40B. The legislation says you can't do that. Oh, we didn't know that. That was someone who had bid $5 million. And I said, really? Okay. So the SRA successful bidder secured the Coast Guard piece. As we move forward, that can become part of the master development, a critical piece. That was 2 weeks ago, by the way. That was 2 weeks ago. The other piece, what you see in pink, was owned by L-Star. L-Star folks were different. let's say. They had defaulted, but they still own that land. That land was taken by the SRA 2 weeks ago. It is now under the SRA control. A huge game changer for this development and the opportunity for the base to be able to go forward in a positive, cohesive way to get the permits that it needs. When did all that happen? Within the last 2 weeks. So when people, one of the first things I tell people, well, what have you guys been doing? Working on this to be able to secure the rights to this land so that the SRA or we control it, that's a big thing of what we've been working on. So Paul, if you go to the next piece. I'm going to ask you not to look on the plan on the right, look on the left. Look on the left is what I was just showing you. That's the Washington Capitol, that's the L-Star, that's the SRA land, purple and the Navy, and then there's some other pieces. As of 2 weeks ago, the land that many of you or residents you may have are also in that color there. But with the exception of some federal agencies and some other things, and the Navy who has an obligation to convey it to the SRA, between us and the SRA, we have everything in blue. That's the difference, because you couldn't do anything. Well, yes, we'll take that applause. We'll take that applause. But no, seriously, that was the effort and the support by the SRA and the communities to be able to turn what we got on the left to what you see on the right is the difference between being able to develop this project or not. And to have a way of looking at it as a place for all of us to live. And you're going to hear from Ricardo about placemaking, connecting open space, all of those things. None of that exists on the left because you can't make it work. It can exist on the right. And that's really what the difference is. And that's really, I'm sorry for spending the time on it, but I think it was critically important that you understand it. And for the folks who are watching it from home to really appreciate that effort. Okay, so that was the first thing we did. And that's the first thing I told you on the agenda, which is really land control. Yes,
1 second, John. I just want to recognize Mayor Bob Hedlund is here. I thank him for coming out. Town Councilor Greg Shanahan and Rockland Selectwoman Lori Childs are in the room. So thank you all for attending.
Great, and thank you for joining us. We certainly thank you, Mr. Mayor, for joining us. Okay, land control. The second thing I thought we'd talk about is infrastructure. Infrastructure, a fancy word for what we got here, which is water, sewer, and parking and related traffic issues. We call this affectionately the spaghetti plan. What is it? Well, you sort of see here, here's the base. Here's the base, here's where we are. And then there are all these different routes. What are those different routes? Those different routes are ways to get to where the MWRA has water. The MWRA probably wastes about 100 million gallons of water a day. Literally goes over the transom because they don't have anything to do with it. They don't sell it to anybody, they have excess water. One of the problems in this region, Weymouth, Abington, and Rockland, is nobody has excess water. I mentioned it earlier, you can't continue and certainly think about developing the base unless you can find a long-term viable water supply. There isn't enough water in any of the communities that the base touches. We even looked at digging water and digging our own wells. And we sunk tests, ran wells. We can lift about 150,000 gallons a day out of the base area, which to do a project of any size just doesn't work. So one of the things that we've been looking at, and literally spent millions of dollars to try to understand, is there a way to get the MWRA water, which is up in the Blue Hills, to come down into Weymouth area, to come down into Abington and Rockland in the base? And the reason why you see all those spaghetti plans is thinking about the routes. Laying pipe in Quincy is different than laying pipe in a more rural setting, different community. So we literally looked at, what if you took a line and you'd say, well, why would you do this line kind of going all the way out here? You do that because of the ability to be able to lay pipe and to bring water to the site. Now, we're not saying this is the solution, and we are far from done, but I wanted you to understand, okay, we spent a lot of time on trying to figure that out. Then you're going to see some more of our spaghetti plan down at the bottom, which is coming from the south. That's from Aquaria. That's the desal plant that's down in Dighton that is a backup water source to Brockton, which is the idea, and they happen to have a pipe that's on Route 18 in Whitman because Brockton supplies all the water to Whitman. So we've also, because we're required to under our state approvals that the former people did, to study all of these alternatives. So yes, we're studying, okay, who has water? The MWRA has water, okay? Where else is there water? The Aquarian desal plant has water in excess of what they're providing to Brockton. We don't have an answer for that tonight. We're working on it. We're trying to figure it out. We know there's, and if anybody who is here in Weymouth has sort of heard about, there's a water issue. Yes, there is. Weymouth has a water issue, for example, but quite honestly, so does Abington and Rockland if you have growth over time, because there is an excess water. Similarly, and I'm not going to get into the story because I'm already going way over my time, but sewer issues, transportation issues. We're analyzing, Vanessa and Associates, who's been our longtime traffic engineer, what would you have to improve? What do you do with the parkway? What do you do with the intersections? All that's part of what we're doing. Okay, that was infrastructure. So we did land control, land issues. Third thing, very exciting, regulatory documents. Oh, well, okay. Let's go to the next one, Paul. These are sort of just a list. Reuse plan, zoning, subdivision, wetlands, housing, design guidelines, sustainability. Most of these are here at the base, and the SRA has them. But they have to be redone. The reuse plan, for example, that exists under the former owner, talked about, I'm going to do 191 units of this, I'm going to do 183 units of this, I'm going to do 165 of this. It's silly. Over a 10, 20-year project, you can't predict what the particular types of units and houses and residents are going to be, and whether you just can't. So they have to be done, and they're done on plans that don't make any sense. You can't assume that in this trapezoidal area, that's where we're going to put this biofarmer user. I mean, it just doesn't work that way. So we have to redo all of that. The zoning, I know Bob Luongo's here, and I shouldn't quote him, but I will. He's the Weymouth town planner. And he, met with Bob Luongo, and he said, I've read all the zoning in Weymouth. As a matter of fact, I have boxes of filings and materials. I still don't know what the hell it says. That's a Bob Luongo quote. Of course, hell is not exactly the word he used, but this is a family show and we're on TV. But it has to be redone. The subdivision regulations that exist today have 50 pages about lighting specifications. They're just not workable, and it's one of the reasons why the project wasn't able to go forward. It was so controlled, but really not understandable, and that's got to get fixed if we're going to be able to go forward and going to be able to do something. And there are some things today, you hear the buzzwords, sustainability, resiliency. They weren't, that sort of it's come in more recent time. So those things have to be built into what the design's going to be, how that's going to be, all have to be put into that. And that's one of the things we're going to work with, and you're going to see about process, that we're going to work with the SRA. All right. You're almost done with me. The last thing we're going to talk about, not last thing, we're going to talk about a few other things afterwards, but understanding the land. I'm going to invite Tony Green and Ricardo up. One of the things that when you look at a project like this is to sort of understand, what do you do? And you think about, what has it been? What is it now? What could it be? And that's really the focus. So Tony's going to introduce, he's been primarily working with Ricardo Dumont. Ricardo is wonderful. You'll hear from him tonight. He's going to show you some of our ideas about reconnecting the open space and the like. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tony and Ricardo to give you a little bit of a sense of, now that you sort of heard the boring stuff, maybe some more interesting things about how we're going to move forward. Thank you.
Thanks, John. So while we were working on land control and investigating the infrastructure and understanding the mismatches in zoning and permitting rules, we've also been working on how to make a place. And I do get to do the fun part here with how to understand the land and to introduce our planner, Ricardo Dumont, in the master planning process. You especially, as residents, already know about the promise of place. You saw it as you chose to make the base your home. Place is hard to articulate, and we're going to take you a little bit through the way in which we began to think about it as background for what Rick is about to show you. And we begin with the history of this land. And this land has been a place, in fact, at least 3 different places over the past 100 years. If you think about before the base, and now after. So how do we utilize the past to inform our planning? And Rick will show you how we've looked at this land in these 3 time frames to plan for this coming time frame. And great places have one foot in memory and another foot in the future and change. So how do we listen to what the land is telling us to create a plan grounded in these histories? This land is nature, the land is a naval air station, and the land is a place to live and work, all to design a better place. Today, the wooded edges that have grown up around and within the base are also isolated by the pavement of the landing areas and runways, some 200 acres plus of pavement. Rick will show how we can use the past to weave a cohesive, connected series of open spaces by adding new internal open spaces that define neighborhoods and provide continuous open space connections. Rick has led our team in this search for place and the ideas that organize place. He's worked with members of our team numerous times over the past 40 years. He's the right planner for this land. His firm, Ricardo Dumont Jenks, has won numerous design awards from the American Society of Landscape Architects. He's worked with over 75 institutions from Auburn to Harvard to the University of Virginia, from New England Development to Pine Hills to Forest City and Baltimore. He specializes in making place through open space, and I couldn't be happier to introduce Ricardo Dumont.
Thank you, Tony. Well, it's always hard to follow John. He's a great talker. He's a mile a minute and gets the points across that the complexity of this particular site. I want to start with is just talk about where are we in this place, in this world. And I want to talk about it relative to what makes enduring places and communities when we think about them in New England or across the United States. I think there are three fundamental characteristics that have to be achieved or be there when we first start, which we feel very positive about in this particular place. First is location, location, location. Does it make sense to be there? Number two, connectivity. Do we have enough connective assets to make sure that it can provide connection to the rest of our region and to our families around the region? And third, obviously, we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight, is the quality of the land itself. Now, is the land have the capabilities to be a place, a special place where you now, many of you, inhabit tonight? So we're going to talk about that. So in this diagram, this air photo, I'm looking north to Boston. You can see our 1,500 acres, plus or minus, in the center of the site there, right here. And then you see the Great Red Road that connects us to the north and to the south, Route 3 taking us down to the Cape if we were going down there, out to 93, and up into the big work centers of Boston and Cambridge. So that's really, if the traffic is good, a 25 to 30-minute drive from us to them, up to the north.
Wasn't mine tonight, Rick, I just know.
It was a little longer tonight, but I wanted to be on the positive side. So the idea here is that, you know, great locational asset relative to other communities within the region. Connecting us to Boston also is, of course, it ends in Quincy, is the red line of the T-stop there. So that's very approximate and just to our north. But the really unique asset for Massachusetts is that we have the commuter rail stop essentially on the site. So that's a tremendous asset for us as well as for the future residents of the site. So we think those locationally and access and connectivity are superb. Now within the base itself, the 1,500 acres, of course, we have the state's made the investment of the parkway. So we're looking at how do we best utilize that asset as well. And of course, the unique feature is we're the nexus of three towns. So that presents, as John has described, some very unique opportunities for us. So, apologize, this is a little light for you, but this next drawing, before I get into the qualities of land itself, is really about two graphs. The underlying bar with three colors is really the history of the base itself, or the land of the base. So before 1940, World War II, of course, it was a great quintessential New England coastal property. Fairly flat, rolling hills, actually one big hill to the south we'll show you in a minute. But basically, it was a bucolic forested property. Okay, sorry. Then for the next 65 years post 1940, the base was built and occupied the property for the next 65 years. late 90s. In the yellow there you see the last 25 years. You all, the SRA was formed, you all became eventually residents of the property and have seen much change in the last 25 years. Some good, some not so good. Now, overlaid on top of that is another graph. Now, that graph, starting here, 1960, so to present day, now that graph is U.S. and regional housing starts in the United States and in the region. So you could see this up and down pattern here. So that says to us one thing. As we proceed, why these two development companies are so essential to this, is the reason is the residential marketplace is highly volatile. You all know that. We all live in New England. We know how volatile that marketplace is. So a great developer in a long-term project like this has to be nimble, highly flexible, and some of the regulatory controls that John talked about have to be flexible enough to live through the years and the decades of which this project will take to develop. So two things. So being nimble as we proceed to the future, and flexible will be the key to success. Thank you, Paul. Okay, so now let's get into the before. I don't know if any of you recognize some of those who are residents here in the long term. So this is the land before the base. So this is a 1939 USGS map. And this land is, as you can see, quintessential New England South Coast. So fairly flat, heavily forested land. There were uplands, there were lowlands, and there was a major hill. I didn't realize this when I go out to the site. It's hard to imagine this. There was a 100-foot tall hill that occupied the southern quadrant of the base right here. That was called Huckleberry Hill. Now that hill, great feature, very typical New England, a great hilltop within a coastal plain, and then that sort of connected to the north and to the south. Then you see this blue line. So also on the site are two very unique ecosystems. One is a north-south, so the water is running from the north to the south in this quadrant of the base. And to our eastern leg, the water actually runs from south to north. So very unique feature, again, totally unique to New England coastal plains. We have, as I said, we have uplands, lowlands, and basically a forested site pre the base in 1940. So pretty unique site. Now, these issues of watersheds and water moving through the site do inform what we want to do in the future that have long been forgotten. Paul, you can go to the next one, please. So here we are. This is 1940, 42. The base has been formed. How did they build the base? So the base would form first, they cleared the land. They cleared roughly 3/4 of this 1,500 acres to allow the base and enable it to function as a World War II defensive strategy. Second, they then took all the cleared land, essentially leveled the land. So to achieve the base runways, they leveled the land. Even Huckleberry Hill, 100-foot tall, served as the gravel repository underneath the runways. So that's how they created the flat moonscape you see now that I've walked several times back and forth out there today. So that the entire base was flattened to create the ability to have the runways work appropriately according to the Air Force and naval rules. And then lastly, they did another thing. So we cleared the land, we leveled the land, and then what else did we do to make this work? We took, remember, Paul, can you go back just one quickly? So I pointed out that was the great stream running through the center of the site. Very beautiful feature. Go back again, Paul. So when the base is created, that stream was flattened and filled. Two major pipes that exist today carried the water from the north highlands up here to the southern lowlands down here. So those two pipes exist today, fairly poor repair, but that's how they rectified the situation to get the water off the runway. Then the rest of the grading they did just pushed the land to the sides, to the perimeter ecosystems there, as you can see. And then created that stream that is now on the western side of our site there. If you walk that trail, is the western side right there, and then created some more and condensed the wetlands in here. So that's what happened in the base. So tremendous transformation of the land to create a needed feature at the time. So that existed now for the past 65 years, and much of this still exists today. Okay, Paul. So today, So the last 25 years, the SRA was created. A bunch of rules and regulations that John went through were created to my sort of headache time. And what the purpose of the SRA, like all the BRAC base closings in the United States, is what's the highest and best use of this land for the future? That's the goal of BRAC, to determine the highest and best use for the communities in which the base is closed is in. So what was created, the state luckily invested and connected, built the parkway going from west to east that connected us here. And then, of course, we went through several opportunities to build communities. So 2 major developers have come through. You all know the story there. John knows the story very well. 2 major developers come here and did not meet their aspirational goals of building the entire community for multiple reasons that John just described. Heavily regulatory issues, not enough capital, and one of the biggest ones is they didn't own all the land. It was incremental growth. So no big idea could be had because nobody owned all the land. So then we have, of course, what did come out of that is 1,200 homes, single family to apartment style, they didn't have in the Northwood Quadrant where you all now live today. No town center has been built, no real retail opportunities to serve that community at all. So one of the goals here, before we get to this, Paul, is to think about this one way and think about this in this way. So why did these things fail? Even though they built 1,200 homes, they couldn't outlast the nuances of the market, and they failed. Part of us thinks they failed because there was never a big idea that united all the property into a single common goal, and that it's enduring and lasts through the ages. Now, if I were to tell you, traveling around New England, you know there are common things that make communities great and challenging and worthwhile to be in. One is there's always a common goal, and most of those goals are around open space. The town green of New England, the town commons of Boston, and other New England communities. Even in Boston itself, Boston's best real estate values and best neighborhoods occur around the open space plan. So whether it's be Commonwealth Ave, we'll talk about that, whether it be the Boston Common, the Public Garden, all the way down to the great parks in the south of Boston, those are all a coordinated effort, not incremental, to build a system that would give the city a place to live and to recreate. So we think the big idea has to be to build a connective strategy before we build a bunch more buildings sitting in the middle of nowhere. So let's go to the next one, Paul. So we're going to talk about what could that strategy be. So the goal is, remember, the heart of the base is still essentially asphalt. Now, luckily, you live in a nice quadrant in the northwest, most of you who live here, but the idea here is most of the site is still asphalt or meadows or runways left over. So one of the goals here is to build an open space framework. How might we do that? So let's examine this. So remember, one of the big issues was when we built the base, it disconnected all the north forests and uplands from the south. So one of our goals here is how do we reconnect the north open spaces with the south open spaces? So one of the first goals, so here is the hangar right now, right in almost the geographic center of the site is the hangar. So north from the hangar, moving south, we've indicated a major new open space, upwards of 3,000 feet long, which is equal to the entire length of Commonwealth Avenue, that goes from north to south to make the first big connection. That's 100 to 200 feet wide. Obviously, be park-like more in the sort of more denser environments. We'll talk about that. And as it goes to the south, it becomes more and more softer, more meadow-like, and it meets the wetlands and that forest to the south. The next thing that we do is the runways. Now, my first day, I walked to the end of the west runway. I was down by some piles of stuff that had been piled down there. I met 4 women come charging down that runway. What are you doing here? And I said, oh, I'm just investigating the land. There may be new ownership here. We're investigating the land. I'm doing my first reconnaissance. And she says, you're not taking away this runway. And I said, well, what do you mean you're not taking away the runway? Well, this is where we walk every day for 5 years. So I noted that in the back of my head. So, nor would I dare challenge them in the issue right there, 4-1. I wouldn't challenge them at all. So, what we've done now with the runways, we think the runways too should be converted. They should be transformed into great long meadows, again, 4,000 or 5,000 feet long, roughly in the site of where the runways are today, both the west runway and then the diagonal runway at the east. So those also be brought into the center of the base. So what does that do? So not only do we connect the north and the south, but these ideas then bring open space, quality open space, into the center of the asphalt world of the base. So that will serve as the foundation for where we build in the future, all those future neighborhoods. Then the third leg of the triangle would be streets that would occur in between those. Again, north-south facing streets would be greenways. They would, of course, act as conduits for traffic in neighborhoods, but also the idea that they would also be walking trails that head north and south, again, to reinforce in a more intimate scale the north-south connections and bringing open space into the center. So that sets us up for the right strategy to build great neighborhoods for the future. Let's go to the next one, Paul. So this is the same view, but now I'm using an air photo. And so here's where you all live, right here, in the various homes and types here. Here's the north open spaces that you see here. The entry road that comes in from the north. The parkway is right here, running this way, east and west. And then you can see the west runway and the east runway. And then, of course, the current east-west runways there. So the first goal, as I said, is centered more or less on the hangar. Right here is extend a great greenway all the way to the south, 3,000 feet long, 100 and 200 feet wide. Commonwealth Ave, by the way, is 95 feet wide. So that extends and makes that grand connection and a grand gesture through the heart of the base. The next, go ahead, Paul. The next gesture would be to add the 2 runways to that. So we're beginning to form a network of giant open spaces that connect us to our south and to our north, but also bring those open spaces to the basis of future neighborhoods in the future. And then the connective strategy of these north-south green streets that would run through each of the neighborhoods that will be of the future. Next, please, Paul. Now, so on that same map, how might we think of groups of homes or densities of neighborhoods be added? So once we add that network of open space, again, remember, that's the hallmark of every New England village and the city of Boston. One of the goals here is where might, the great question you all have asked for years probably, where is the town center going to be? So the idea here is in the red or the pink area here, here's where the hangar is again here, is right here, is the goal is, again, as we explore in the next coming months, we believe that the town center should be located on the northern section of the proposed green, somewhere between where the hangar is today and the current parkway is right here. So somewhere in there, we think the amenities of a real town center, however large that is able to be developed, should occur right there. Now, that's a pretty interesting place. Not today, but it could be in the future. Why? So obviously, we would build great densities around there, like to the 4 or 5 story densities we have elsewhere in the current plan. But one of the things that's so opportune about this is that that is the geographic center of the entire site. So if I were living out here, or if I were living out here, that's exactly a 10 to 15 minute walk to get to that center. So what we're chief goal of any great community is to make it as walkable as possible, to not have to get in our car once we're home or working here. So it's a 15-minute radius all the way around here to walk back to the center, and it's a 15-minute radius just over to walk to the T. So if I were working in Boston or Cambridge, I don't ever have to get in my car. I could just take the train, assuming it's running more faithfully in the future. Our next governor will ensure that. And make sure we can get that. So that's a 15-minute walking circle around the town center. Hugely valuable for community asset. Then as we build density, this also tells us around those great greens, we should build our densest neighborhoods. So when I say dense, 3 to 5 stories, just like we have today, should be there. And that will ensure the success and vitality of the future town center. Because around the town center, they cannot be out by themselves. They have to be in the center of the action where most of our people will live. So the goal here is to get the highest density right here. As we move southward, still some good mid-rise densities here. Same thing around the east and west greens right here. Our highest densities there. And then our lower densities should be out scattered, single-family clusters and single-family detached and attached should be clustered around the ends of the area outside to the perimeter to attain our goals there. And we'd have a full spectrum of types of homes should be the portfolio. Because obviously, remember that nimble comment I said earlier? We have to respond to the market if we're going to endure for 30 years. Okay, one last slide, and then I'm going to talk, and then I'm going to give it back to the maestro. So I want to leave you with this. So here's a plan of what we just saw. What we're talking about tonight is a restorative idea. We're restoring some of the qualities of what was there before the base. It is also an idea that connects north and south. It's an idea that locates the center in where it should be, in a geographic center, walkable place in the middle of the site. And then lastly, this is where we build our future neighborhoods that will join you in residence here. So I'll stop there and we'll take it on with John. Thank you.
Ricardo, thank you. Ricardo always does the interesting, sexy stuff. I get to talk about process and regulations again, so I know you're all waiting. But let's, if we can, Ricardo gave you an idea of it is our big idea. We've been a little bit delayed getting to it because of some of the things I talked about, getting the land under control, being able to move forward. But okay, how do we get there? I'm going to talk a little bit about process and timing. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we've done to date. Some of it we've touched on tonight. And what do we do next? And how long is it going to take? Thought that might be interesting to people. So if we go to the next slide, Paul. Trying to figure out how to show this to you, we thought about graphically, and the idea of we've got 2022, 2023, and 2024. What this really is 3 buckets of time. And there are 3 major things that we have to do to make this work. The first bucket is really the SRA. It's the exciting regulatory documents that we're talking about, zoning, subdivision, all those things that have to be put into place. We have to work on those, and we've prepared internal drafts of those. We're reviewing those. We're going to be presenting them to the SRA to talk about how we think this ought to be structured. Okay. 23, what do we do next year? Assuming we are, and hopefully successful with the SRA, we have to do town meetings. We have to go back to town meeting, and actually we have 2 town meetings, and also then working with the council here in Weymouth to talk about here's the new zoning, here's what we'd like to propose, would like them to adopt what the SRA is doing, because the SRA is ultimately the permitting authority, but has to be adopted by the community so we can move forward. At the same time, I gave you sort of those various initials, Natural Heritage, MIPA, MassDOT, all of those agencies that we have to make filings. When LSTAR finished its work about 2017 and 18, they had many permits left unfinished, unfiled. We have talked to the MIPA office, talked to the director of MIPA. She said, yeah, I got a whole room downstairs full of Union Point / LSTAR stuff. And they're going to let us move forward what they call a notice of project change, but we have to present all of our studies with respect to infrastructure, traffic, transportation. All of those things have to be represented. So we have to go through that process. We have to work on fixing up what MassDOT is. You can't have 500 cars a day, any more than 500 cars a day on Route 18. We got to go fix that. Natural Heritage, there was a conservation permit on this land. LSTAR defaulted on it, defaulted on the payments, they defaulted on the work. That all has to be looked at again. So we have to work through that part of the process. We'll be doing it pretty much at the same time we're doing some of our local process, but we need to get some things finished locally. The third thing is we have to go back and amend the legislation. This legislation that created the SRA, that modified it, that actually has to be redone. Why does it have to be redone? It has plans filed with it that says LSTAR. It has specific plans as to what they're going to build. They just don't work. We've actually met with parts of the state delegation and talked about that because we're going to have to redo that. And that's sort of the last step. People always say to us, well, when are you going to get when am I going to see a shovel in the ground? When are you going to start building things? Well, I hope if you've learned nothing tonight is, unfortunately, this is what we got to go through. We had to do it when we did Westwood. $400 million worth of default, All the permits had to be redone. Took us 2 years to do because we had to go and redo it all again. One of the reasons why you want people who are committed to the site and committed to us for a long time, because this is going to take a while to fix what you see here so that we can implement the things that Rick was showing you tonight and make the place that you want. One thing that he mentioned very briefly is the idea of town center. When I talk about what questions were, everybody has talked about the town center, and I want to talk a little bit about the timing of that in a minute. Paul, if you could go to the next slide. Yeah, I don't want you to try to read this, but it's sort of what have we done and what have we got left to do? Well, we did all this land control stuff, which is everything from working with the SRA, working with Washington Capitol, Coast Guard, L-Star, all that. Infrastructure, we've started studying all that. We still have to do planning and zoning. We still have to do the SRA work. We still have to get all the state permits and approvals. That's the kind of thing that we look at every day about, okay, how do we keep moving the ball forward? Because this is a task of sometimes not very exciting work, but to just move it forward through the regulatory community so that we can move forward with what we all want the vision to be. And that's what we have left to do, and that's why I tried to show you graphically a little bit about the time frame that's there. Paul, if you could go to the next one. What have we heard? We've heard a lot of questions, and this isn't all of them, but we thought we just might help, and especially for the people who are listening at home, to talk about a few of these things. What have you been doing? Well, I hope you see what we've been doing. It's been mostly trying to figure out land control, getting the agreements in place, understanding the infrastructure, and how do we move forward. That's a lot of what we've been doing. Is it going to work this time or not? Okay, good question. Yes, of course, is the answer. But why is it going to work? One of the reasons New England Development and Brookfield Properties are together is we are both regionally and nationally and internationally pretty good at what we do, and we've been very successful at doing it. We have an excellent credibility with the regulatory authorities. They know when we do a project, we carry forward, and we stay there for a long time. That's why it's going to work, because we have the resources to do it, and we know how to do it, and we've done it before. This one's got a lot of hair on it. I mean, there's a lot of things that, when I use the word, it's kind of a mess from a regulatory standpoint, I wasn't kidding. It is. But we do know how to do it, and we've got a great team that's been together for a long time. So it's going to work. It's going to take us longer than anybody wants to, though. Longer than we'd like to. We'd love to be in the ground, but got to have water, got to be able to flush the toilets. Until we figure that out, it isn't going to go. Third thing, will there be new residential? Rick talked about that. Yes, there's going to be. Will it be all of varying types? We have single-family homes, we have duplexes, townhomes, we have low-rise multifamilies. Yes, you are. We're going to offer all residential, all the different types. Many of them, they're already here. Are you going to have commercial? We didn't spend a lot of time on commercial tonight. I think you can see from both what Brookfield does and what we do, a big part of our business is commercial development. We do a lot of things in lab and biopharma and office buildings and retail centers. We get a lot of questions about people who would like to locate here. I have to curate them correctly and locate them correctly, but we've got the land. One of the reasons to make this all blue, you saw that in that early slide, was so that we would have that opportunity. Exactly what type of commercial? People have said to us, well, why don't you bring the pharmaceutical people down here? Well, I'll give you an example. We're working with one right now. We're working with a company that actually did all of Moderna's vaccines, all during COVID. One of the issues is they need 1 million gallons a day of water. So I'm going to go back to my earlier point. We got to solve the infrastructure. We got to be able to make that work to talk about. And by the way, if you looked at their facility that they built, it looks like an office building. It looks like a 3-story office building. What they do is, they process and they create the vaccines for Moderna. And that's a company we're actually working on with another site. So yes, would love to build some of the commercial opportunities here. But the one thing, and it's the last question we put up here, is there going to be a town center? Okay, we cheated. We put a picture of the hangars at the end and what the town center might look like. Mm-hmm. Because here's something that we know is very true. There is no place, and it's going to take us a while to create it. But one of the first things we have to do is create that town center where you can get a cup of coffee, maybe there's a restaurant, maybe there's a place for a dry cleaner. We know a lot of those services around. And quite honestly, 1,274 residences aren't going to be able to support those types of town center. So one of the things we work with Washington Capitol, we work with the Carpenters Union. They were very supportive of the idea of one of the first things we're going to do is the town center, to create a place. Now, will it be actually right off the hangar, off that meadow? Will it be closer to the parkway? Will it be one sort of quadrant down? I don't know that yet. But it's one of the first things we're going to build. And even though it's not going to work from a financial standpoint, and we hope you'll all sort of go there and like we've done at Pine Hills, you have to make a place. Part of making a place is a place where people can gather and see. So it is part of what we're going to do. That is sort of one of the images that we've been sort of working about how to create that going forward as one of the first things that we do. Paul, if you could go to the next slide. We're going to finish up. Available for questions. We have a microphone in the middle. I'd like to talk to you about two things about sort of housekeeping. Our website, reimaginethebase.com, if you Google that and go on it. And this is for people who are home or otherwise who are here. If you don't want to ask any questions tonight, put your name in. We will answer any question that you want, information that you want. We'll try to answer it and get right back to you. So that's something you go to. And obviously, if you want to stream the presentation tonight, I think most people in this room know how to do it, but also we'll put it up on there. So with that said, we are going to stay after the question and answers, but I'm going to say if there's anybody who wants to ask a question, the microphone is here. We'd ask you to go to that and not shout out the question from your seats, otherwise the cable TV fellow behind me will get mad and start banging on the door again like he did before. So we don't want to do that. So if you have any questions, we're all here. Most of our project team is here. Happy to answer them. But thank you very much, and thank you for coming tonight. We appreciate it.
Hello, I'm Evgeny. I'm a resident at Union Point, and I have a little bit of flashback. Like 3 years ago, I remember you sitting here, and I was at this microphone. So I do think there is a progress, but as you said, not soon enough for everybody. But that's okay. So the question I have several, but one of them is there are also, you're talking about 3 years to figure it all out. There are talk about like building a hotel or the entrance to the Union Point. Are those talking to each other or not? That I believe like Marriott or some other kind of company, I believe it's still kind of public. So it might be a question both for you and for you, kind of how that hotel permit
So
process.
the hotel that's proposed is under a public hearing right now. The public hearing is active. We act as a quasi-judicial authority to review that, and we're still in the review process. So as far as that goes, any questions you may have about the hotel itself, you'd have to do at the public hearing process, and that's where the board can answer those questions.
So it's going to be still kind of considered outside of master plan. So it's separate.
It's right now it's a plan presented in front of us that we have to look at all aspects of, including the master plan.
Got it. Okay, and the other question / comment is, you said that our community of 1,200 people might not support it, but did you see those humongous apartment buildings that were built recently? I'm pretty sure they probably just doubled the community by building those 3 buildings. So you might not actually be that bad off with building that town center. So can you give some time frame? When do you think that one of the first things that you will be building will be town center will be?
Our expectation, it is the first thing that we will build, will be a town center. Right now, we're envisioning it could be anywhere from 30 to 50,000 square feet, that we would put different type of community uses in it. The bigger it is, the harder it is for, even though it sounds like a lot of people here to support it, but our sense is it's got to be the first part of the placemaking, and it's got to be in the right place. So we'll build that first. As you might imagine, it's a highly subsidized thing in the sense of we're going to have to build out all the space for everybody. We're going to have to give them free rent. It's just sort of the way it is. But it's something that we collectively, Sid and I have a lot of discussions about it, that we're ready to do because we think it is part of the placemaking. What's really going to be in there, from the outset, we don't know because we are probably, still a ways away from that. But we heard that very early on, so that's what we're going to try to do.
Got it. But do you think it's like 2024? Is it 2026? Kind of any ballpark?
No, as we showed there on the chart, our goal is to be done by June of '24. So in the two things that we have to do that, we know that the permanent water and sewer solution isn't going to be there.
Right.
Hopefully by then we'll have an interim solution. That's the one thing that we will do, knowing that we can do it incrementally. In that sense, but we have to know that there's a permanent solution for the rest of it, so you can actually build out the entire development. We're going to do that first. I mean, our goal is to be looking in, sometime in late '24 that you're going to start to see something.
Got it. And last question, again, you guys are doing a lot of work, but it does feel like the place is deteriorating. As we speak, right, like there are people racing down the, right, like yesterday I drove down the Delahan Parkway, somebody kind of ran and knocked out a bunch of trees. Is anybody kind of going to take a little bit more ownership and try to keep up the place at least? Before even you start making it beautiful, can we try to kind of keep up the appearance for the 3 years? Otherwise, you know, before it might get worse.
No,
Always good to get better after it gets worse, but can we try to
well,
prevent
we know
that?
it's going to get better if we're there and people are living there, and we're building there. We do constantly, even though not everybody may see it, talk to the SRA, and the SRA is very good about, trying to, police what goes on and, try to make things better than they are. Well, yeah, I know we can debate. It's not the easy part of this site is, when you have a failed development, and it is. I mean, I'm not talking about you folks live great. And,
I've been here for 7 years.
But the rest of it is, mischief happens, and that's one of the reasons why we're really pushing hard to move it forward, because we know what it can be, and until we're actually there on the site, moving dirt and moving, and building things, you can only do so much to make that better. I mean, that's true, because there's too many acres where there's nobody there at its pavement.
All right. Well, thank you so much, and really looking forward to some exciting developments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
I'm Carol Jules, a resident of Faring Way, and I'm wondering if the acres that are currently under conservation easement will be off limits to building of housing and other structures.
I don't think we really show it on this area. Our theory and part of what, and maybe go back to the Ricardo open space, is we're actually going to put an area, maybe go back, here. If you look at it, one of the things, and this plan doesn't show it, but our zoning plan will, we're going to create green space all the way around and rim the entire base in green protected space, because we thought that, and then you add to that the connections of the meadow and the green space to connect the open spaces at the top and the bottom. We think that's sort of one set of things. One thing we do have to redo is the natural heritage permit. The natural heritage permit is there. Parts of it were modified but never completed. They're in default under it because Elstar didn't make the payments. That's all going to be done. But our goal is what's protected is going to stay protected. We're going to change some of the areas protected because now we have more information on, I don't want to get into the eastern box turtles and where they live and the fact that they've been monitoring. We have more monitoring information on it. There are some things that are going to change. We think we're going to suggest we expand some of the areas that are protected for eastern box turtle and some other things.
Thank you.
Mary Parsons, Rockland. Do you own any land here?
No.
Okay. That green space is already created because I was on the MIPA process for this space. And even before that town meeting, my town meeting, voted several plans. What I'm seeing is you've left my town out. We already have zoning. We already did it in 2016. We have a very nice plan there. That's not this.
This is a representation of connecting the green spaces. We are going to change the zoning map, and we're going to change it in all three communities. And that's not something we're focused on tonight, but that will be something that we will do.
Well, unfortunately, when you come to my community, it's by town meeting.
It is.
The issue that I have with this is the green space already created. We already had a town center. You have to solve the water problem, the sewerage problem, the transportation problem before you get to do any of this.
We agree. You're right.
And there's a certificate that's in place, and all of the 2007 certificate has to be done. It's current.
It's not.
You have to actually widen some streets in Rockland.
There are work that has to be done from a transportation standpoint, but a lot of what Elstar did in the last MIPA filing of 2017.
No, I know 2017, but it was just transportation. It wasn't the whole thing.
but they didn't finish
Well,
a lot of the other
Guess
reports.
what? Then you're back at 2007 certificate. Yeah, you are. I know, because I was part of that committee, that state committee that did all of the environmental impacts of this space. The heritage permit falls on them. They have to do that permit. Okay? It states in the permit that master developer, but ultimately, it's going to be them, and it's going to be on the SRA to keep doing that permit. The other issue I have is you said you had a 1939 map that was like this,
The USGS map. yes,
the
ma'am.
landscape. How did you get a 1930 map that looked like this? Because the Navy didn't own this. There were farms, there were people living there.
Oh,
It didn't look like this. The expansion came in 1958 and 1960.
What I did, and it's available to all, you go on the USGS website, you can call up a specific quadrant map, and on that quadrant map, I located the current property of the SRA on that map, and then use that as a base.
Right, but this was actually a lighter-than-air military base when it was built, when it was first built.
Right, but this is before that.
That was
Before
in 1941, late 1941, 1942.
Yeah. So I used a 1939 map before the base was constructed. It showed the land as it was in 1939.
Well, it wasn't looking like this because there were plenty of court
No,
cases.
no,
Yeah.
this is after, and this is
Right.
moving to the future. But the previous one, it was basically a forested New England coastal plain.
Right, but what I'm saying is, you won't pass, Rockland, with this. You won't pass.
Well, Mary, I'd say this to you. I hope that when you see what we're going to do for natural heritage and what we're going to protect and what we're going to do for habitat, that eventually you'll turn to us and say, I'll support that at town meeting.
I'm seeing where you're not even going to get through with natural heritage.
All right? Barry, you certainly have that opinion, and you're welcome to it.
It's not an opinion. I know you're not going to get through there.
Okay, that's fair. No, we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Obviously, another member from the old folks' home. With respect to the land and its use and its features, there's a lot of capped landfill, and there's a hell of a lot of wind. And this was intended to be at one point a smart planned community, and it seems to me smart involves renewable energy use to the extent possible. Mm-hmm. And it seems to me that solar panels could be put on the capped landfills, as is done in communities all over the state. And there ought to be room enough on here to locate a turbine or two far enough away from habitation not to cause problems. And I think a significant part of our energy could be generated on the site. Thank you.
Good ideas.
You actually raised a really good idea. Part of, and it was when the base was done, some of the initiatives that you build into a project today about sustainability, passive house, use of electricity, all those things were not built in. It will be part of the proposal that we will make. I know the prior speaker had another comment. We have to refile all of those things with MEPA, and the MEPA initiatives today will require us, and we will want to, put a lot of those initiatives for energy and into the proposal that weren't traditionally there, given that this started really, that many years ago when we didn't know as much. So that will be built in. It's a good comment.
Good evening. Marty Cates, here, a resident in Union Point. You had made a comment that water is the major problem, and it has to get done. Is that a guarantee? Can it get done? Is there any way that you can envision that it won't get done?
Yes. I mean, it is the major issue, probably where water is. As far as whether that's a solution, as I said, we've been looking really for over a year at different opportunities, whether that has something to do with, as I said, early on, we tested to see if we could actually lift the water on, from the base itself. We've met with Abington, we've met with Rockland, we've met with Weymouth to sort of talk about what's available to it. We have to find a water source that's not currently here. That would be something that if we're unable to do that, that the project wouldn't go forward. Our expectation is we're going to be able to solve it in working with the communities and the stakeholders. I think from many perspectives, and I shouldn't say this because the mayor is here, but I think it's true, and I think Bob Luongo, that Weymouth, for example, has to solve this issue going forward in any event, just for its own well-being and growth, as Abington and Rockland have challenges on that. So I think we can come to a solution for it. It's a lot of work. I can't tell you we've got the answer to it, or I can say, oh yes, this is what we're going to do and this is what works. It's part of the time that we're taking to figure that out. It's been an issue, a problem, a coming problem for a long time. I would say to you that water is going to be the challenge for Massachusetts and all of its communities long term, because you have DEP who's trying to say to communities withdraw less, and by the way, that's statewide. So that's a real issue. And they're not creating new water supply. You have a lot of issues about contamination. I think everybody in this room's read about PFAS and things like this and these forever chemicals, which have damaged some of the water supplies of other communities. These are the challenges there. We don't have the answer yet, but we're spending an awful lot of time to figure it out.
Charlie Collins, Abington. What's your total build out as far as homes, condos, apartments? What's your number in mind? You got to have a number in mind.
Well, I'll tell you what the number that went through 2017 was: about 4,000 homes of different types and 8 million square feet of commercial space. That's actually what was filed for as part of the MEPA certificate. I can't say we have yet determined what we're going to do. That gives you a baseline of what was filed in 2017. We don't think there's that much demand for commercial space. We do think there is some demand for commercial space. So we're trying to figure out, but part of what we're figuring out, and I hope you took from some of this presentation, is we got to understand what the water and sewer and what our infrastructure is going to be and what's it going to support.
That's the limiting factor.
It is, because you can't get enough infrastructure to support it.
Right.
I mean, right now, we can't build one. So that's where we're at.
Also, can you speak about the zoning changes that you're anticipating? Because each town has changed zoning at least 2 or 3 times. Every time a developer comes in here, he wants to change zoning. And it's a long, drawn-out process because you have to go in front of each town's town meeting.
Yeah, I think I stopped counting town meetings in my career at 100, and I've probably done a lot more than that. I think I stopped counting at 130 towns in Massachusetts. It is a long, drawn-out process. Our thinking on the zoning is the zoning that applies to what people who live here today and what you own, we're not going to change. We're going to leave that alone. So the district that you're in and what the rules and the bylaws say, we're leaving that alone. What we are going to suggest is for the balance of the land, the part that hasn't been developed, that we would create a new overlay zone that would say, in this area, these are the things that you can develop. They're the part that isn't developed today. And the reason we want to do that is because parts of the zoning are so complicated, convoluted, and inconsistent that if we don't create a new overlay, now the same type of restrictions about, you can't do these kinds of uses, and here's what the commercial can be, and here's what the residential, same kinds of things that you see there today. But we felt that it was important that if you already bought your home and you live there, we're not going to change that zoning. We're going to change the zoning as it relates to the part that isn't developed. And that's what we're going to end up proposing to the SRA, that type of an approach. Isn't done yet, but that's what we're doing.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Yes, ma'am.
Councilor Shanahan was up too. Oh, okay. After her, Councilor.
Mary Corey, Ferring Way. To stay with the water issue, it's such a critical piece in all of this. And as you said, that if you don't get the water resources you need, the project is dead. My question is, and I'm assuming that there's been a great deal of conversation with the town of Weymouth in regards to the water. And if I'm not mistaken, last week, Mayor Hedlund, I hate to put you on the spot, but he was talking about his conversations with the MWRA and working out the details. And I'm wondering how significant that will be in terms of what you're trying to do with this whole project. And maybe Mayor Hedlund could give us a little bit Sorry to put you on the spot, but I am.
Well, that's dangerous, Mayor, to let me start. Yes, there has been dialogue with the city. The city's been focused longer than, we've been in that dialogue about the MWRA and how that might go forward. It's almost, and I shouldn't take the mayor's commentary because I hope he would say this, it's almost irrespective of the base, what we do, because to address the water issue going forward. We're a piece of that puzzle because obviously we need water to be able to do the base. We're not the whole piece of it, but we're obviously would be a percentage of the demand that that Weymouth might explore with the MWRA. So that's kind of what I would say. And I think Mayor Hedlund's office has done a very comprehensive, thoughtful job about how it can move forward. It's very complicated, but I'm going to turn the microphone over to Mayor Hedlund, and he can kick me if I said something wrong.
I brought my can of seltzer water with me, and I thought I was going to have a leisurely evening here tonight and take in everything. We actually were briefed a few weeks back, so I was really interested in coming to hear the question and answer period. So what was, excuse me, said earlier was sort of repetitive. We spent 2.5 hours before the Ordinance Committee on this topic a couple of weeks ago. And the chairman of the Ordinance Committee is here, Councilor DeFazio, so I'm just going to hand the mic off to him and he can summarize. I'm trying, when I was waiting to come up here, I was trying to think how I was going to summarize those 2.5 hours into a short answer. So I'm going to try. The short answer is, obviously when I became mayor 6 years and 10 months ago or so, this project was underway. And there was some work being undertaken to look at the water source because there are requirements spelled out in the 2014 legislation that dictates that the developer work towards a water source. There was a water agreement in place with the town of Weymouth and the developers that was updated at one point. I forget what year it was by us. But obviously, when things unraveled, efforts to look at MWRA or alternative water sources sort of slowed down. But some work had been done, and we had an arrangement with L-Star that our consultants were going to really serve as kind of a peer review, but ultimately they folded into that work and were working for both entities, us and the developer. As time went on, sort of on our own, but I guess in a parallel course at the same time, while these guys were doing their due diligence on assembling the parcels, we started looking at, based on some of the preliminary information we were getting from the work that was done 2016, 17, 18, we took a look and said, if we're going to be bringing MWRA water in to Union Point, let's consider what it would mean to have the town go on MWRA water. And as we looked at that, and the more we looked at it, the more intriguing it became due to a number of factors. The fact that there was early discussions with MWRA when we made some inquiries that the $40 million entrance fee would be waived, for instance. Or the fact that, and you mentioned the spillover, but the statistic I always remember on the MWRA question is that if it didn't rain in Massachusetts for 16 years, they could still supply their customers. That's how much water they have in the watershed at the two reservoirs. So a lot of this information obviously intrigued us. We looked at, some of the routes and the fact that not only was the $40 million waived, we had ARPA money available to us to do some work potentially that can be applied to this. The state representative, now Speaker of the House, Mariano, is very supportive of this concept. He provided an earmark, worked towards getting us an earmark for $350,000 that funded a feasibility study. Now, some of those costs prior to this obviously were on the developer, but we took advantage of that $350 to look at routes, to look at the feasibility, and actually it was a broader effort effort to look at MWI water for the region, not just Weymouth. It should be noted that it's a struggle, as it's been pointed out, for a lot of communities, but if you look at communities south of the MWRA district, which pretty much ends at Quincy, we're not as bad off as huge problems. If you've ever gone down Route 3A and looked at that Situate Reservoir, you can walk across it. This is a struggle that a lot of communities are facing. We haven't had to implement bans as often as some of the communities south of us. So that study that was done was looking at kind of a regional solution. But some of the existing MWRA infrastructure, I'm getting too deep into the weeds here, but some of the existing MWRA infrastructure to get the water to Weymouth doesn't allow the capacity to get beyond us after what our needs are. So there is enough for Weymouth with the existing infrastructure that's in the Blue Hills to get to Weymouth, but not necessarily enough capacity that would allow water to go even further south of us. So it is a scarce resource in terms of the infrastructure. The other thing that was interesting about this when we looked at what the costs might be between the ARPA money, the fee being waived, we know that it's going to be on these guys to pay the bulk of the infrastructure costs, and how we could take advantage of that and piggyback off of them as opposed to them maybe piggybacking off of us. Those details are going to have to be worked out. So, the stars were pretty much in alignment as we looked at this. The one downside that we had to consider is what does it mean for ratepayers in Weymouth? And we provided the ordinance committee with, if I'd known, I would have brought copies, but it's a hard question to answer based on a lot of variables, but we're sort of in the range if we were to go this route, pretty much within the range of what other communities are paying. Some would pay more, some are paying less based on what our projections would be. But there's a potential for savings with, we know that we would have a savings in some of the sewer costs. We're already an MWRA sewer community. But there's some variables that can affect rates that could equalize things and maybe get us to a point where there's really not a net increase. If we look at any surcharge from Wheeling to the base might be, or further south of us, but those are things to be worked out. So if we looked at sort of a grid, and we have a packet, if anyone's interested, we can share with you. How many pages was that, Bob? We provided about 21 pages of information, some really good charts for you that are easy to understand that we provided to the committee. Anyone calls my office tomorrow, you can get a copy of that. So did I answer that as succinctly as I could without spending a lot of time?
You've answered it, but it's raised concerns about how this is going to impact the project at Union Point and how the costs may escalate in terms of surcharges that Union Point the development might have to.
Well, they were paying a surcharge prior to my swearing in as mayor already. So that was already in place, but
We're taxpayers.
it was, yeah, and it was pointed out. This is becoming more of a scarce resource, and you've got an amazing resource in the Quabbin Reservoir and the Wachusett Reservoir, and Quabbin Reservoir water was rated the best quality drinking water in the United States of America. There's a lot of pluses when you look at this issue. So we're still in that mode of trying to figure out the best route. We're getting close to the consultants coming to a conclusion on that, I think, and trying to pin down what rates would be as succinctly as we can. So,
If you take nothing of that, it is complicated and difficult, and we don't have all the answers yet. But that's probably our number one. If you ask me on this project what keeps me up at night, that's it. So we're about 8:30. What time are we? About 8:43.
Council.
About 8:45.
Council.
Council,
Shanahan.
please. Thank you.
Apologies for extending out your meeting.
Oh, that's fine. Please.
Greg Shanahan, Councilor at Large here in Weymouth. John, in your second to last slide, one of the bullet points was, will there be commercial? And you answered your own question by saying you would love for there to be commercial. I didn't hear you say that there was going to be commercial. Is there a scenario in which there won't be commercial as part of this project? I mean, we're talking jobs, we're talking amenities for folks who already live here. I would hate to see a sprawling residential community where, you know, frankly, the town and the folks who already live here, or who are taxpayers, you know, could certainly use some amenities and whatnot. So do you envision a chance where there might not be commercial? Is that what I'm to take from your answer? And I'm not trying to be argumentative, but just you didn't say yes.
Council, that's fine. No, I mean, we want commercial space here. We intend that there will be commercial space here. Exactly what type that will take. I mean, yes, we'll do a town center, which will be commercial, but that's not going to be of a size that, you know, not insignificant. We think it could be up to, call 80,000 square feet, but that's not going to be, we want more commercial than that. Exactly what, and we get calls for commercial space here all the time. And it's very difficult that we have to, you know, sort of take those names and we meet with folks and we spend the time and then we explain our challenges and they say, okay, well, when you're ready, please come. So I mean, that's what a lot of what Brookfield does. It's what we do. We want to have that. Do we think there's going to be a large residential component here? Yes, absolutely, given the size of the base. I mean, today's dollars, and I think you know this from Weymouth, the houses that are there today and what they pay to Weymouth versus the costs are all a net positive. So residential is a net positive, especially the residential that we expect here. But we want commercial space, very much so. And we're going to include that in our MEPA filing, and we're going to promote that commercial space. Again, exactly what type that's going to be will be somewhat related to what infrastructure can support and what we're going to have for water and sewer. But yes, absolutely, no question.
I look forward to it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Maybe one more, but I said we would wait afterwards. Yes, we have one more. We'll hang around for another 15 minutes or so after this gentleman asked his question.
So, Joe Bain from Faringway. We do a lot of hiking and walking through the property, and as you go through a lot of the wooded areas, there are a lot of test wells. We assume that's because of water needing to be mitigated. Is there any recognition of that, or is there any plans to deal with that? Is the Navy going to deal with that?
The Navy is required to have a lot of monitoring wells. There are a lot of monitoring wells on the site. As the site becomes developed, obviously we'll be able to deal and close out sites, but you know, for right now, that's a requirement. They have to have them, and they have to give annual reports. Thank you again for coming. We appreciate it. As I said, our team is here. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I just motion to adjourn.
Moved.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Well, that's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.